Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode I shall be reviewing the Martlet Mk.IV, a British premium naval fighter coming at a tier of 2 and a battle rating of 3.0, this plane only being available at the moment through completing 5 or more of the Operation Summer 2018 tasks for air combat. For the purposes of today's historical overview, we'll be taking a look at the F4F Wildcat in British service, and the Martlet is the designation of the Wildcat initially in British service. With that, let's begin. Following the United States Navy's initial order for 78 F4F-3 aircraft on the 8th of August 1939, Grumman soon offered the aircraft for foreign export under the designation of G36A. For context, G36 was the original designation given to the ex-F4F-3 prototype aircraft. The G36A would differ in that it would be powered by the Wright R1820 G205A Cyclone radial engine, providing 1,200 horsepower but only having a single stage supercharger. This was unlike the two-stage supercharger fitted to the F4F-3's Pratt & Whitney Twin Wasp R1830 76 1,200 horsepower radial engine, which was not available for export at the time. By the end of 1939, France had ordered 81 G36As, Greece had ordered 30. With respect to the French aircraft, only 7 G36As had been built by the fall of France on the 25th of June 1940. As a result, the British Purchasing Commission took over the production contract, and the first of these aircraft was delivered to the United Kingdom in July of 1940, where it would be in service of the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm under the designation Martlet Mk.IV. The Martlet Mk.I would be the first American aircraft to score a victory in British service when 2 Martlet Mk.Is of 804 Squadron downed a Junkers Ju-88 near Scapa Flow on the 25th of December 1940. The Martlet Mk.II followed with an order for 100 aircraft placed by Britain immediately after the fall of France. These aircraft were powered by the Pratt & Whitney R1830 S3C4G 1,200 horsepower radial engine, which again had a single stage supercharger. The first 9 aircraft arrived in March of 1941 with fixed wings and armed with the F4F-3 standard 4 12.7mm M2 Browning machine gun layout in the wings. The outstanding 91 aircraft were delayed so they could be fitted with the Grumman stow wing folding wing system as originally fitted onto the F4F-4, also uprating the plane's armament in the process to 6 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns. These aircraft started to be delivered in August of 1941. Meanwhile, Greece's order for 30 F4F-3As would fall into British hands following the fall of Greece in April of 1941. These planes being designated as Martlet Mk.IIIs as they had the same engine as the Mk.II but not the stow wing. These aircraft were to operate in North Africa. The Martlet Mk.IV, the plane you'll see on screen today, followed with 220 aircraft delivered between February and November of 1942 under the Lend-Lease programme. These aircraft were F4F-4s adapted to meet Britain's requirements, with the original Pratt & Whitney R1830-86 1,200 horsepower radial engine swapped out for the Wright R1820 40B Cyclone 1,200 horsepower radial engine with a single stage supercharger and a more compact engine cowling. The Martlet Mk.V followed in 1943 with 312 FM1s as the original aircraft was designated when production switched from Grumman to General Motors on the 18th of April 1942, supplied. Note the Royal Naval Fleet Air Arm took the decision in January of 1944 to retain the American names for US supplied aircraft, meaning that these planes were redesignated as the Wildcat Mk.V from this point onwards. The Wildcat Mk.VI would follow with 340 FM2s delivered, marking the final variant of the Wildcat in British service. And so with our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the Martlet Mk.IV handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Our first gameplay for today takes place on the Ground Strike map, Greece. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts are our machine guns, the reasoning being these are the most powerful belts on offer in my experience, quickly bringing down any given foe in the skies. Our gun convergence is set to 400 meters, noting that this is for the purposes of turn fighting, where by the time we get guns on target in the turn fight, our foe will typically be between 300 and 500 meters from us, so this gun convergence will work very well in this regard. As for our fuel load, we are taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game, unscathed on fuel capacity. Before going into our analysis of the aircraft, let's note this first gameplay takes place where we're going to be seeing battle rating 3.7 to 4.0 aircraft, so this is the worst case scenario if you will, whereas the second gameplay will focus when we're the top battle rating aircraft or towards the top end. And what we'll see is the play style across the two gameplays is rather similar. except in the higher battle rating scenario, i.e. where we're towards the bottom end of the battle rating spectrum, the weaknesses of this aircraft will become more pronounced and we'll have to rely on the strengths of this aircraft even more. And a key weakness of this plane at its battle rating is its climb rate. It's below average at best, and planes such as the C202EC, the M.//R 9 and the Spitfire Mk.IV will outclimb this plane considerably, whether it be in the short term or the long term. And even slower climb rate planes such as the Yakovlev Yak-7B will outclimb this aircraft in the long term. And when we're seeing higher battle rating opposition, such as the M.//R 9 it means that we're never going to win in the altitude race in the first instance. So we have to focus on picking on targets at moderate altitudes, such as this P-108A Series 2, who seems to be looking towards us to try and force a head on. We dodge over the top and now come down on top of them. In the process we are going to pick up an assist, but unfortunately we've taken significant damage to our fuselage for a Fokker 490A1 that we did not anticipate. But fortunately for us, this allows us to tap in to one of the key strengths of the Martlet Mk.IV, which is its high durability threshold. Now this means that you have the ability to take a lot of damage on the fuselage before this plane finally starts to fall out of the sky. And we can keep our control surfaces intact for a long period of time, despite the fact that our rudder is currently showing as orange and we're able to use it to its full potential still as we try to bring down this P-47 Thunderbolt. In the end, getting our guns on target, albeit as they make their way away, we'll pick up a hit and that will lead through to an assist. So let's qualify that durability a little bit further. You have the ability to sponge a lot of machine gun ammunition to the fuselage and even a good chunk of 20mm cannon ammunition, whether it be high explosive or another type of shell. This means that you have the ability to not worry about being hit every so often. You have the ability to fly into situations, and if you're not 100% spatially aware of what's going on and you do take some intercepting fire, you do not have to worry about being immediately punished for it. Albeit if you do get hit on the wingtips with a 20mm cannon shell, as would be standard to the fighter to your battle rating, you'll see the wingtip come flying off. That's nothing of exception. As for your cockpit, the pilot is able to withstand a good amount of fire. We can see here that our pilot is in amber condition, despite all the incoming fire from that Fokker 490A1. That means your pilot is going to be secure and typically make it home. And with them being in amber condition right now, we want to get home in order to get them back to full health and therefore have full capabilities available to us with this aircraft. The only undermining point of the durability of this plane is in terms of its engine, which very quickly will pick up damage, especially in a head-to-head, even against the likes of say a Ki-27 Otsu, where the small caliber machine guns of that plane will shred the engine of this aircraft if they're allowed to hit. So head-ons can be nice in the fact that you have a lot of armament available and you can cut down your foe very quickly, but they can also be a nightmare in the fact that they'll see your engine completely disappear from the aircraft. And it's worth noting, when you do have to go land in this plane, deploy your landing gear early, because the landing gear requires open environment manual winch, which is operated by the pilot, and that is going to take multiple turns, I think in excess of 20 historically, and that means the landing gear is going to take an exceedingly long time to deploy. You don't want to get caught out by that. Now as we touch down, the opening stages of this game have not been too fruitful. We picked up 2 assists, but we haven't really seen much beyond that. We're caught by surprise, a player error, i.e. S.U.M.E.R on my part, I wasn't spatially aware of the Focke-Wulf, but most importantly, we have not been playing to one of the playstyle strengths of the Martlet Mk.IV, and it comes away from the F4F-3 Wildcat and the F4F-4 Wildcat, the link to the latter review being available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now. And that is, you need to play smart and pick on targets of opportunity. You cannot force aggression unless you've got all of the cards in hand, and that's because of the lack of pace of this plane. Now I've already talked about that in terms of climb rate, but you also have to consider that in terms of straight line speed and overall acceleration. Now in terms of acceleration, from the stall speed, which is a respectable 125 km/h in this plane, if you want to use engine power alone, it will take you a decent amount of time to get to 340 km/h, and beyond that point, your acceleration will begin to peter off. This is nothing exceptional, but at the same time this is not too much of a problem. Your acceleration fits in with the likes of say the Spitfire Mk.IIa, or alternatively the likes of the M.//R 9 at your battle rating. But more importantly, engaging more emergency power will allow you to kick this threshold up to 450 km/h, and beyond that point you see a dramatic decline in acceleration, whereas other planes such as the M.//R 9s that you'll be encountering and the C205 Series 1 will be able to continue to accelerate to speeds in excess of 500 km/h without too much of an issue. And that's where you start to hit your upper speed limits, in the fact that you're not going to be able to chase down foes very easily, and the only planes you're really going to be outrunning are those which are able to outmaneuver you in a turn fight. And the examples being the A6M Mod 11 at a battle rating of 3.3, the historical rival of the Wildcat, i.e. the Zero, the plane that could outmaneuver it, and the two planes were roughly equivalent in terms of speed. Was replicated here, you have a slight speed advantage over the Zero, but it's only a minor one. And this is reflected in the fact that if you go up against the likes of, say, an I-16 Type 27, again you have the speed advantage, but not the manoeuvrability advantage. So there's going to be a limited number of foes you cannot outturn, and in return you'll need to outrun them. But you need to pick when to fly away from them, i.e. take the flight rather than fight, as otherwise they're going to be bearing down on you as you start to pull distance on them. Because when you look at the dive speed acceleration in this plane, it's average at best once again, comparable to the likes of, say, an I-16 Type 27 before it hits its threshold, or a Spitfire Mk.IV. And your threshold here is 750 km an hour, at which point the acceleration of this plane will drop off dramatically, and it will take you a lot of altitude, an extra 2,500 meters altitude, to get up to your maximum dive speed of 875 km an hour, and that's with WEP engaged. So in return, this means that you do not have the ability to run away from a good number of foes that can outdive you, such as the Messerschmitt 109s. And instead you have to think again about when to pick the fight and what manoeuvres you're going to make, as otherwise you make the wrong choice, you're going to be ripped apart. But again, this is a learning experience for you as the pilot of the Martlet Mk.IV, which is going to make it an ideal aircraft for beginners and even those who are looking to improve their fighting capabilities in the skies, because you have to know what you need to do in a given engagement in order to win or achieve parity, or at least buy yourself time to let your allies get into the fight and help turn the tables for you. Now, as we make our way back into the centre, we've also been seeing in the background it's a little bit of frustration on my part, in that I have 650 caliber machine guns that would love to cut apart enemy bombers. But the problem is, I lack the overall pace to be able to get up into a position to intercept the enemy bombers, such as the Condor, which was shot down by our I-185. Now we bring down this Fokker 490A1 who wasn't really paying attention here very quickly, and this goes to show the lethality of the 50 caliber machine guns, in the fact that you only need a short burst on target, 200 rounds there, in order to bring them down. And let's start to talk more about the armament of this aircraft. The machine guns will exhaust ammunition rather rapidly. This is one of the historical weaknesses of the Martlet Mk.IV as carried over from the F4F-4 Wildcat, in the fact that you have the same ammo capacity as the base F4F-3 Wildcat, which had 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted in the wings. In return, you have the ability to dispense a lot of ammunition very quickly against your opposition and bring them down with well placed fire. But you need to weigh the two against one another. If you're not accurate, then you'll need reloads on a more frequent basis, and you'll need to invest in your reload skill, and on top of that know when to pull out of the fight and take a reload, otherwise you're going to be caught short when you try to bring down the next foe in the engagement, dealing only damage to them rather than bringing them out of the sky completely. And if you do not manage this appropriately, the effects can only start to expand. You may find yourself in a furball and you have no ability to start cutting your way out of the furball because you have to wait for, say, a 10-second reload, or in our instance, a 13-second reload as demonstrated. So this is why we're trying to keep to the fringes between each engagement to go for that reload if needs be, or have the reload on standby. We're not always going to apply it because we think we want to try and get into a 1 versus 1. And in this instance, the 1,200 rounds available to us will be more than enough to bring down an individual foe, so long as we're able to follow them cleanly in the fight. But at a distance of 400 meters, which is where our gun convergence is set, we should be able to follow them accurately, even if they are rather evasive. Now we're looking around, we're not able to get into a fight at the moment, because remember, we have to weigh up when we're going to be able to get into the right situation in order to try and bring our foes down. And that's because if we come onto manoeuvrability in this plane, that's where the picture starts to appear all rosy. Now the turn circle of this aircraft is not the best around its battle rating. The title of best turn fighter, if you look at turn circle alone, would go to the A6M2 Mod 11 at a battle rating of 3.3, and then go along to the I-16 Type 27 at the same battle rating. You fall in just a little bit behind that. You've got roughly the same turn circle as a Spitfire Mk.IV at a battle rating of 2.7, and above the likes of the Dewartine D520, the French aircraft, of 3.0. This works out in your favour, in that you can outturn the vast majority of your opposition, and with your control surfaces being well balanced across the ailerons, or your roll rate being high, giving you the ability to change directionality on the fly, your rudder being very strong, comparable to that of the I-16, alternatively the Zero, in that you can flat turn very quickly, hammerhead well, and input your rudder into a standard turn in order to bring the plane around very quickly, as we saw against the P-47 earlier on in this gameplay. That means you can swing this plane around and get onto target very quickly, turning the tables in the turn flight. It's only the elevator that's going to hold you back because it's a heavy control surface, and what this means is that whilst you can loop tightly once you've engaged the control surface, you're going to bleed a lot of energy per loop compared to some other aircraft, and this means that it's going to be difficult for you sometimes to follow an opponent who goes into a dedicated fight in the vertical. As we go after the Hellcat Mk.II here, we're trying to bring them down as quickly as possible because we've got a C202 coming in. And as we follow them here, using our ability to follow them on our elevator, because we've got comparable elevators and they've got bombs attached which gives them an inert weakness, we can see a C202 EC coming in right behind us, and we quickly snap out the way using our roll rate to do so, forcing them to overshoot. As they try to turn to come around here, we're able to use our tighter turn circle to start cutting into them, setting them on fire, and that'll be enough to bring them out of the sky. You can see how the manoeuvrability allowed us to turn the table so rapidly, force the overshoot, follow them in the turn, bring them down for our third kill. And now it's about time we should go for a reload, because we've got 354 rounds remaining, and this goes to highlight the fact we expend our ammunition rather quickly, but we were accurate in those two engagements there, meaning we had ample ammunition left over, and this Spitfire had come in a little bit earlier on, we would have had some ammunition left in order to try and bring them down, before forcing them away, because we'd run out of ammunition, but still be on the 6. As we break away then, we now look for some more targets of opportunity, or we look for a situation that we can turn to our advantage, perhaps thinking about the S.U.M.E.R that's coming in, whether they're level bombing or not. And if they are designed to level bomb, they're approximately 3,500 metres altitude at the moment, so we should be able to get there on an interception course just in time. But we do have to weigh up the fact that the S.U.M.E.R is now climbing to altitude as well, and would achieve a blocker situation, getting in our way, escorting the S.U.M.E.R to target. So we're having to keep an eye on what's going on in the enemy team at all times, see where our allies are positioned as well, in order to understand what we can and cannot do. Now, for manoeuvrability here, we have highlighted the fact that within the ideal speed range of this aircraft, being 275 to 400 km an hour, you'll be able to get the most out of the control surfaces because of the high manoeuvrability. And you can go all the way down to 200 km an hour before the control surfaces start to head towards stall effects, where your stall speed being 125 km an hour. This is going to be unlike a good number of the planes you're going to face, particularly in the higher battle rating category, which will have higher ideal speeds, so forcing them into those low to medium speed turn fights will work to your advantage. The downside, however, is when you go to high speed, your control surfaces really begin to lose their controllability. For boom and zoom, this is not good, or even just chasing a foe in a dive as they go into a dive to try and get away from you. And we're looking towards the S.U.M.E.R, we haven't quite got ourselves in the interception position, we're still a little bit underneath them, actually underestimating they're at 4,000 metres altitude rather than 3.5. So instead we have to turn our attention towards the Fokker 490 that's climbing up towards us. Here we're going to be baiting them upwards because we've got an ally coming in the form of our Yakovlev Yak-9T. The Fokker 490 is out of the game, and now we can turn our attention to the Mk.IV that's coming in. And they seem to be unaware of our incoming presence, so we swoop down on top of them, and we achieve a critical hit on the right wing of the F4, who snaps at the last moment for a head-on, and we dodge the incoming fire, just in time. As we come around now, we'll start to follow them, trying to close the distance or keep the distance as close as possible as we take out their pilot and bring up our 4th kill. Now we're looking around for the 5th and final to achieve our ace in a day. We will start to talk about the high speed thresholds in the second gameplay, as it would be appropriate for us to wrap up this one by focusing on what's going on, rather than what's not going on. Chasing after the Mk.IV, but we realise we've got 2 allies chasing them down, where it appears to be 3 allies now, so there's no point chasing this foe, so instead we're looking towards the centre of the map once again, particularly the Breda 88, which is coming in at high speed, probably going for a low altitude strike. I'm thinking perhaps we can hit the Mk.IV on the fringes, but they're proving very evasive, so a long shot is going to be difficult. And do keep in mind you have the ability to use your 50 caliber machine guns out to a distance of 1.8 kilometers. If an opponent is flying in a straight line and not pulling too much distance on you, opening fire at that range can achieve some rather interesting results, such as bringing a bomber down at extreme distance. And looking towards the Breda 88 coming charging in via a dive here, we're right on the interception path, and this should be rather clean. In fact, we'll just keep dumping in the ammunition, providing ample lead on top of the lead indicator to anticipate the fact they'll start getting away from us, and it'll be enough in the end. As we start to pick them off, they're getting further and further away, but providing the right lead, we should just about get them. As we're now closing the distance, they proved a little bit evasive there to dodge one of our allies, and that means we're able to start building up our speed to equate their position. We take out their pilot, and that's our ace in the day in the bag. And we can see there the average dive speed acceleration matching the Breda 88, but nothing beyond that, as the enemy team lose another base, and it's only going to be 1 ground target now before the enemy team's out, as we look towards this Hell Diver, who we may be able to catch up to in a similar fashion to the Breda 88, but we're coming a little bit slower here. Although they have turned in front of us, the game ends unfortunately, and it's time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. With our 5 kills and 2 assists, we're able to pick up 22,245 silver lions and 5,153 research points. Thus far in this first game then, we've hopefully seen how the Martlet Mk.IV requires a measured style of play to get the most out of it, because you lack the overall pace to force an engagement on a foe. You lack the climb rate to get above your foes in the first instance, and on top of that you lack the overall speed to be able to chase down a foe, whether it be in a dive or a straight line. Therefore, you have to think about how you can cause the engagement to come to you, and on some occasions you will have to reverse the engagement, as we saw with the C202EC who came charging in behind us as we wrapped up the Hellcat Mark II. And using your superior manoeuvrability to reverse an engagement is going to be a strong point. But do not be afraid to take damage, as the fuselage of this plane is welcome to do so, whether it be from machine guns or a 20mm cannon. And it's through employing this series of contrasts to your advantage that you're going to start to really reap the benefits of this aircraft. Now, this first game was of course an example of a higher battle rating game, heading towards battle rating 3.7 and 4.0 opposition, which is not what you're always going to be seeing. So we're now going to move on to the second gameplay of today, where we're towards the top end of the battle rating spectrum, and we'll be able to try and get more out of the Martlet Mk.IV. Albeit do keep in mind that our playstyle on the whole will be similar, in the fact that we're going to have to be slow because we lack the pace to be able to dominate our foes in the first instance, but over time the results can come in and we can really start to pick on key situations to get the results to swing our way and hopefully get a higher kill count than just the ace in a day. Let's get to it then. Our final gameplay for today takes place on the ground strike map Cliff Coast. For this we'll be using the same setup as before, noting that we changed our camouflage pattern to the non-standard bicolour camouflage, which was available after completing 6 of the Operation Summer 2018 tasks for air combat. I'm not going to give my personal opinion on which camouflage is better, they're both unique to the aircraft and they both add a different take on the aircraft skin. But more importantly, our opening gameplay is going to be the same as with the first game. We'll try to use our sustainable but below average climb rate in order to get as much altitude as possible and then assess the situation as the enemy aircraft are revealed to us, like how many aggressors are up on high versus how many are down low, and we'll pick on them accordingly. And as we go for altitude we will see around us we've got an allied Hurricane Mark 1 lane out climbing us to altitude, and if the Lag 38 underneath us wanted to continue gaining altitude, they'd only start to fall behind after a period of time due to lack of sustainability on their climb rate or their rather weak engine compared to our own in the Playstyle fuselage. So instead, as we make our way to altitude, again we have to realise that we're going to be at the whim of what appears up on high. It's not a case that we can always force the situation to our advantage unless we decide to bait our foes into a 1 versus 1 and turn the tables accordingly. And with the enemy C202 up on high, this starts to bring in the concept of maximum altitude limits for the Martlet Mk.IV. In terms of engine, 4,500 metres, at which point the acceleration on the engine of this plane starts to drop off, especially once you hit above 5,000 metres altitude. And in terms of control surfaces, at 5,500 metres altitude, you'll find that the elevator becomes considerably heavier and this only becomes more pronounced with increase in altitude. So instead, we're going to keep to our ideal altitude range where possible of 3,500 metres or less. And the reason I wanted to use the C202 in order to trigger this discussion point is the fact that at 3,500 metres altitude or less, planes such as the C202 EC, comparable for the battle rating, have stronger performance on their engines even at lower altitudes. But the difference is once you go to higher and higher altitudes, whereas the Martlet Mk.IV's engine performance drops off rather early, planes such as the C202 with their Daimler-Benz engine will be able to retain their performance to a higher portion of altitude. And that means that the difference between your aircraft and the performance of your opponent, such as the C202, is going to become more pronounced as you go higher and higher, and this really starts to put you at a disadvantage, something that you may not be able to overturn for your superior manoeuvrability as easily as you would at lower altitudes, as we saw in the first game with the C202 EC coming in charging behind us. As we now come about, having headed off to the western side of the map, we can see that the C202 seems to be engrossed in bringing down our friendly bombing aircraft, and we've got an enemy Wildcat still to deal with. This is going to be an F4F-3, albeit we cannot assume it's going to be one in the first instance until we get close enough to identify them. But what's important is, if it's a -3, they have similar manoeuvrability to our own aircraft. If it's a -4, they have weaker manoeuvrability. But we'll talk about that comparison a little bit later on. For the time being, let's focus on the 1 versus 1. We're going to snap right out the way of their incoming Browning machine gun fire, and then cut underneath them via a split S. What it appears they've done is they decide to turn over the top of us rather than come down on top of us as we try to force the overshoot through the split S. This means we can come up behind them, and before they're able to react, it's too late for them, and we pick up our first kill. Now we're going to go into a boom and zoom dive against the foes down below us in order to demonstrate the poor high speed control of the Martlet Mk.IV. This starts off with your roll rate, which contracts horrifically between 450 and 750 km an hour, losing 75% of its overall performance, making it very difficult for you to turn the plane in order to follow a target. On top of that, your elevator starts to lose out massively as well, between 450 and 700 km an hour as we kill off the Thunderbolt initially. What you'll find is that you'll lose 50% of your elevator's performance in the positive G interface, whereas in the negative G interface, you're going to lose 75% of your elevator's performance as we pick up a triple kill there, adding in the F6F-5 Hellcat and also a spinning Wildcat in the middle of the sky. And finally, with regards to the rudder, you'll find that between 450 and 650 km an hour, you'll lose 75% of your rudder's capabilities, and it's going to be very hard for you to point the aircraft in a given direction or try to make that minor adjustment in order to centralise your aim onto your opponent's fuselage. So in return, you need your foes to have stalled out underneath you or be flying in straight lines, and that's what we had there with regards to the 3 foes we picked up, and we carried this through to bring down the P400 there, bringing up our ace in a day. We're going to carry our momentum towards the enemy float bomber now in the form of the HAK. in that as we charge towards them, we can see that our speed is gradually bleeding off as we're in a shallow dive. And in terms of straight line energy retention when coming out of the dive, the straight line energy retention of the Martlet Mk.IV is rather poor as well. In the fact that you're only going to start holding on to your speed once you drop below 510 km/h in level flight. Going head to head with the H8K, we very quickly dispatched them out the skies, picking up our 6th kill, and this brings us further and further onto the concept of energy retention. In that in the horizontal, you actually find that the energy retention of the Martlet Mk.IV is not too great. In a very limited turn fight, the energy retention of this plane is going to work okay, but if the turn fight goes on and on for a considerable period of time, you do bleed a considerable amount of speed in a standard turn with this aircraft, and in a loop, as we mentioned earlier on in the first gameplay, you're going to bleed a lot of energy out of this aircraft. So what you'll find is every so often you will need to commit to a downward manoeuvre, whether it be a split S or something that at least starts to point the nose of this plane downwards, so that way you can build up a little bit of speed. Otherwise you'll find that in the end in the turn fight, you're going to lose too much of your energy and not be able to hold in the fight once you go below 200 km/h. This is something that can be used by your opponents to their advantage, particularly in the form of a climbing spiral to reverse the situation when you're right on their 6. But with that considered, what about vertical energy retention for the purposes of boom and zoom? And what you'll find is this plane is okay in the vertical in terms of energy retention for boom and zoom tactics as committed over a distance in terms of altitude of 1,400 metres, at which point if you started off at say 5,000 metres altitude and a speed of 300 km/h, applying war emergency power to the return climb of your boom and zoom pass, you'll be able to get back up to 5,000 metres altitude with 300 km/h speed approximately at a return climb angle with war emergency power active of 30 degrees. As we come down the A20G Havoc here, we provide too little lead at first, but then when we get lead on the target, we start to rip into them, picking them up for our 7th kill and taking a small amount of damage to our right hand wingtip, applying the durability of our airframe once again. And what we can see here is we're making this side of the map our own for the time being, picking on those who want to try and take advantage of our ground units, or really our naval units we should say at this point. But you get the picture in that we can be area defense if we want to, and there's not too many opponents coming our way. Unfortunately, it looks as though the enemy team are now sending a mass force to attack our naval units, and being one plane against many here is not going to work out. With there being a S.U.M.M.E.R 19 on the way, there's also a P400 and a P36 Hawk. And the P36 Hawk will match us in terms of manoeuvrability, the P400 will not, but will have the 20mm cannon to bring us down over time, and the same with the S.U.M.M.E.R 109, if it's saying ML3. So instead we have to fly away back towards the centre of the map, and look towards friendly lines, noting the B-34 up on high on the enemy team that's bombing our bases, and we may wish to try and intercept them. Although if we're going to commit to that, that's going to take a considerable period of time. And we do have a P-47 up on high, along with a B-25 who seems to be adamant of using their bomber as an interceptor. So unfortunately we have to surrender the ground to our naval units at this point, with our S.U.M.M.E.R 110C also falling down over there. But by staying away, we're not going to attract too much attention to ourselves, and really it'd be disadvantageous to go into a 3 versus 1 in this aircraft, as whilst it's good in terms of manoeuvrability and durability, it's not invulnerable. So making our way away at this point, what we can now look towards is the centre of the map and we'll turn to the up on high and try to pick the next encounter. And we can see that we're changing between roles as things go on, where it be going towards higher altitudes in order to bring down our foes, 1 versus 1s, a little bit of boom and zoom, a bit of area defence, a bit of interception. You have to think about how your role evolves over the course of this game. This is not going to be a one-trick pony, and that's what's lovely about the Martlet once more, and the fact that you have the ability to learn how to apply a plane in a given role over the course of the game, albeit you have to be flexible in your role, so you're going to be learning how to accommodate multiple roles as you go. Now another thing we should come back to is in terms of performance characteristics versus the Wildcats that are currently available, the F4F-3 and the F4F-4. Now in our preceding reviews what we found is the F4F-3 is the more manoeuvrable of the two. It's the superior plane if you want to go into a turn fight, simply because it has the stronger control surfaces, it's not as heavy an aircraft, albeit it has 2 less machine guns than the -4 which has the superior firepower to bear. Albeit keep in mind that both planes are tapping into the same 1,440 rounds of ammunition, so it's not as though you've got greater ammo capacity in the -4, and this is going to undermine you if you do not control your ammo count as regularly as you should. We've already spoken about that. Where the Martlet Mk.IV stands is in the fact that it's actually between the two. It takes the manoeuvrability of the -3 and the firepower of the -4 and puts the two together, which is a wonderful combination, because for those who have enjoyed flying the Wildcats today, this is going to be effectively, in my opinion, the best of the 3 Wildcats available in game to date. In the fact that you have the ability to bring as much firepower to bear as the Mk.IV, albeit without any of the manoeuvrability penalties conferred by that additional firepower. That's because the change of overall engine and the contraction of the engine cowling on the Martlet Mk.IV compared to the F4F-4 due to the British requirements for a plane that was tailored as part of Lend-Lease. Therefore you have to consider that you are flying the best available aircraft within the Wildcat series to date in game until we get the likes of the Martlet Mk.V etc. in, or the F4F-7, the final variant of it from what I recall. As we break away here, we can see that we've got a Duotino D520 following us, and it's a plane that can match us for pace rather nicely, but not in terms of movability. And this is where we're going to bait them over towards friendly territory, setting up for a situation where it's going to be a many versus one. If we're not able to beat them in the forced 1 versus 1 we're going for now, then our allies, the Messerschmitt 110 and the people who discern, will be able to do so, as the Duotino is getting dangerously close for us to continue evading. We cut underneath them using our superior rudder and then cut over the top of them, taking some damage to the central fuselage but nothing major. Noting the durability of our plane applying once again, and we pick up a hit with our 50 cal as we cut across, picking up the assist as a result, as our Thunderbolt takes the Duotino out of the game. And we can see here how we used our pace in order to bring the fight back to friendly lines, something you have to get used to doing as well, and the fact that you're not always going to feel comfortable perhaps in being able to take on foes 1 versus 1 when you're over friendly territory, but we timed the engagement just right after coming out of a boom and zoom dive on multiple foes in order to bring our foe, the remnant foe, back to friendly lines and encourage the fight to be one that we could fight on favourable terms. And something you'll have to appreciate is that your opponents will try to do that to you as well, in the fact they'll realise that you do not have the speed to simply just chase them down very quickly, and therefore they'll try to spend as much time as possible getting you to a situation where you are the one who's going to be stuck in that 1 versus many. Now here we're going to return the favour for our Thunderbolt, who's being assailed by a much more manoeuvrable Heinkel 112A0, in the fact that we have the manoeuvrability to beat them, but the Thunderbolt does not, and we're going to cut in and get them out of the sky before they're able to pose an even greater threat. Picking off here for another kill, our 9th of the game and our final kill of this game. Now the rest of this match is going to switch back to a much more slower paced one, albeit this game has been slow in general, but you perhaps haven't seen it that way. And the fact that we've been flitting between certain sections of the sky, whether it be up on high, towards moderate altitude, down on low over our naval units, or back over terra firma in the west. The problem is, when your foes are not coming towards you, or alternatively you haven't always got yourself in the situation to be dealing with continuous opposition, or set up those continuous opportunities, then it's going to perhaps be a little bit tedious in terms of how things are going to play out, unless you decide to just simply throw your plane into an engagement, which you can do. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Some people are very good at that, just tossing themselves into a situation and dealing with it on the fly, adapting to the situation as it's demanded. But here, playing more conservatively, we now got to consider what does our team need in terms of role, and that is an interceptor. Because there's a Heinkel 111 up on high that's heading towards one of our bases that's severely damaged, and they're going to try and finish it off. Now whilst we're at 1,200 metres altitude at the moment, we can get that over time, but we've got to invest a lot of time to get to the bomber. And unfortunately what is going to turn out in this match is the fact that the Heinkel 111 will get to the base before we're able to intercept it. We're going to put ourselves in a position to get there before they can start attacking the second base, which is close by. So a little bit of a spoiler there, but it's just to point out again, this is going to highlight how slow the Martlet Mk.IV is compared to a dedicated interceptor. And the only other thing to note really on this plane is in terms of its stall recovery, something we haven't highlighted yet. The stall recovery of this plane is favourable in the fact that you'll very quickly go from your stall speed of 125 km an hour to 190 km an hour by just getting the nose down on this plane, getting it into a level position, and the plane builds up speed at an admirable rate. Nothing to worry about, stalling is not an issue. And one thing we perhaps didn't highlight as much in the high-speed control domain, and I should actually come back to now thinking about it, this plane will wallow on its elevator in excess of 700 km an hour. And this is something important when you're going up against this plane, or alternatively when you're flying it and trying to run from someone. If you come out of a dive and pull up on the stick, i.e. go for a positive G response, this plane will not immediately come back to the level position. Instead what will happen is the plane will actually exceed the level position coming out of the dive. You'll find that the nose actually goes above the level position for a considerable period of time, and then it starts to level out. And all this time means you lose the control of the elevator service for say 2 to 3 seconds, and that can prove fatal to your aspirations in flying this aircraft. And we can see now the Heinkel 111s were breaking away, and because they have the altitude advantage and the inherent speed, we just simply cannot chase them, and the game is really coming to its end at this point, albeit we pushed the bomber away, and now we're looking towards the TBD-1 that's coming in towards our ground units, but by the time we get there, the game will have come to its end. And we can see a friendly Thunderbolt now going after the Heinkel 111, then more the dedicated interceptor, as the game comes to its end, and it's time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. With our 9 kills and single assist, we're able to pick up 31,669 silver lions and 4,734 research points. To defeat the Martlet Mk.IV in a given matchup then, I can recommend one or two approaches. The first is more the exceptional case, and that is where you have the manoeuvrability advantage and the tighter turn circle, in planes such as the Hurricane Mark I Late, the I-16 Type 27 and the A6M2 Mod 11. Turn fight with the Martlet Mk.IV and over time you'll reign supreme, considering you're also going to have the stronger horizontal energy retention compared to this aircraft, and that means you're going to be able to stay in the turn fight longer, whereas the Martlet Mk.IV pilot is going to have to put their nose down to build up their energy and start again. The alternative approach, more the typical one around the battle rating, in planes such as the C202EC, the Mk.IV and the Messerschmitt 109 ML4, is to engage this plane in the vertical via boom and zoom. As you're going to have the climb rate advantage from the outset, you're going to have the speed advantage on your aircraft, whether it be straight line speed or the acceleration to get up to speed in order to maintain your distance from this plane, and over time what you can do is use your superior energy retention in the vertical and your climb rate together in order to force the Martlet Mk.IV to stall out in your wake and then come down it hard and fast. If you find yourself in a turn fight against this plane, use a climbing spiral to try and force it to stall out in your wake, as it will over time through the combination of its poor climb rate and poor horizontal energy retention in the long term, and this means you'll be able to pin it in the sky, swing around on your rudder via a hammerhead, and again open fire on the target. But by avoiding such circumstances in our own Martlet Mk.IV today, hopefully we've demonstrated that this aircraft is a rather capable fighter, which can switch between roles on the fly so long as their pilot is aware of the fact that they will need to do this. Primarily, it's a strong turn fighter. It's going to work very well in a 1 versus 1, but every so often, if the opportunity calls for it, you can engage in boom and zoom activities, or alternatively act as an interceptor against incoming ground attack or bomber aircraft, and you can use those 650 caliber machine guns to great effect against all planes, quickly chomping through your opponent's fuselage and netting kills. Do keep in mind that this is not a fast aircraft, which means it's going to be difficult to dictate engagements a good chunk of the time. But if you're aware of what's going on, and that spatial awareness will carry through as a result to your ability to be able to bring down foes, whether it be through forcing 1 versus 1 to your own accord, or reversing 1 versus 1 engagements. And if you do get hit, do not be worried, because the fuselage of this plane is able to take the hits for you and ensure you're able to get home. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, as always ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.